Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. We just wrapped up our interview with Connor Boyack, author of the Tuttle Twins. Anthony, what was a takeaway or two that you had?
I would tell you, this was an amazing podcast. He had shared the reason behind inflation,
He did.
right? And he had shared a story of NPR article or on the news was saying the reason for inflation. Are you guys ready for this? Beyonce and Taylor Swift, Queen Bee, is responsible for inflation. But what he had shared as a story is that the child in the back of the car had heard that story. Says that's not true. That's not how inflation is started. But imagine that kid he had enough knowledge to know to determine truth. But imagine how many people had heard that same article or that same news feed and really thought that T Swifty is responsible for inflation. But what that shows the importance that we need to teach our kids some of these values of independence and business. And I had asked him, like, when's a good time to present this with the kids? And he pulled out a book that was for infants, and he turns to and it says, O is for opportunity cost, right? And T is for taxes. And I just thought that was pretty cool to be able to start opening up the kids' eyes to some of those ideas. And, we also talked about how do we present this to our kids? And he had shared, I was thinking, do we have a financial reward or some sort of incentive? And he says, no, just lay him out and don't even mention it to him. But he's like, the kid's curiosity is going to be a little interested because they're going to be able to know it's a kid's book, and ideally we want to try to get them to read it themselves. And another one is, if you're listening to this, you'll obviously listen to podcasts. But if you have kids, you might be finding maybe your kids are great. Would be a great opportunity for them to learn about passive income and infinite banking, of listening to the Infinite Wealth podcast. But if they're a little bit younger, want something a little more softer, they have a podcast. And that would be a great way while you are taking the kids to school or to soccer games to really be able to have a little fun and for them to learn. What were some takeaways you had?
Yeah, a lot of takeaways. This is a good one.
Yeah, it was a good podcast.
It was a good podcast. My takeaway was just the importance of teaching our kids how to think and to think critically. One of the comments I made in the interview, that's right, my takeaway is what I said in the interview, was I said that, right, it's no longer good enough for our kids just to go to school and learn through rote memorization. We've got to get them to show up. They've got to ask critical questions. They've got to start thinking logically about some of this stuff and not just accept what's being told to them, as they do need to question it. They do need to evaluate some of the ideas that are being presented to them, but they need a framework for this understanding. And so one of the best platforms that I've found is the Tuttle Twins book series, right? My kids are 13, 11, and 9. And these books are awesome. And during our interview, I held up this book. This is one that all my kids have read, but my son actually just did a report on this. And the idea of critical thinking came to me is because in the back of the book, they have discussion questions in here. And I'll tell you what, you guys read this book, read the discussion questions. The questions are not just, hey, what did so-and-so say on page 12 or page 6? It's asking you to understand the concepts that are discussed and then asking the kid to apply it or give an example of something that happens in the real world. So really, really good resource for kids here. Hope you guys find as much value in these as I did.
I'll tell you one thing. We did this live stream, and so there were some comments in there, and there was one by Garrett, and I would confirm, and he goes, "This is so great. I feel like having kids of my own."
Yeah.
Now, I do have kids of my own, but man, there's so many resources now. Sometimes I wish I could go back and implement some of these with my kids, but since I can't, great opportunity to invest in the grandkids.
Guys, Connor Boyack is founder and president of Libertas Institute, a free market think tank in Utah. He's been named one of Utah's most politically influential people by the Salt Lake Tribune. Connor's leadership has led to dozens of legislative victories, spanning a wide range of areas such as privacy, government, transparency, property rights, drug policy, education, personal freedom, and more. A public speaker and author of 25 books, Connor's best known for the Tuttle Twins books, a children's series introducing young readers to economic, political, and civic principles. Connor lives outside Salt Lake City with his wife and 2 homeschooled children. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Take care.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast, where we teach clients how to build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
Connor, welcome back, man. We are excited to have you back once again.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. For those of you that are not familiar with Connor, just real quick, I know there's just a few of you, but he's the author of the Tuttle Twins book series. It's a series of children's books that teaches kids about the ideas of freedom, money, entrepreneurship, and personal responsibility. And just as a little plug, maybe to us, is that when we get clients, this is the books and stuff that we're sending out to you guys. Right, is we have a great foundation in education, and Connor's a big part of that for our clients. So we're excited to have you here again today, Connor. Thank you again.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you say that. We have a number of partners and friends who do what you're doing, who do like wealth management or financial planning. And without any effort on our part, they've all kind of spontaneously started doing this. So I've asked over the past year or two some of my buddies that have told me this, like, hey, yeah, I have a wealth management practice, and we send your books to our clients. So I'm curious if this is the case for you guys, but the answer that I've gotten is that a lot of these people are doing it because they're hearing from their clients who are parents and grandparents that their kids and grandkids are kind of going astray, if you will. They're becoming social justice warriors. They hate capitalism. They want to eat the rich, bite the hand that feeds them. And so these parents and grandparents are really concerned about the rising generation. They don't know what to do about it other than complain about the condition of the school system. And so that's why these individuals have been sharing the books. I'm curious if that relates at all to your sentiment or experience.
Absolutely. I know for me personally is, how would I say this, is I think one of the a great mistake that a parent can make is just assuming that your kids are going to have the same beliefs and values that you have. Is that's not a given by any means. And so we need to instill that into our kids. And right now, the way that I see it is I see a lot of outside influence. And a lot of times that doesn't match up with what my beliefs are or the way that I would like my kids to be raised. So that's an issue. And additionally, the reason that I kind of started searching out for resources was because the message that I got from parents was that it's really difficult for someone that's successful to kind of pass that on to their kids, right? And so just talking about money and how to handle money, how to create wealth is very difficult to transfer generationally. And so that was kind of the impetus of kind of going out there and searching for resources for myself.
And one would hope that the schools would be teaching kids these ideas and supporting families with these lessons. And not only are we finding that schools aren't teaching these types of ideas, financial management, economics, and understanding markets and money, not only are they not teaching it, oftentimes kids are learning quite the opposite ideas. And you have teachers who are more activists than educators, and you've got biased textbooks and dumbed down curriculum. And so I applaud you for making that decision for your own clients, because I think it's needed. It's why we do what we do, of trying to put these resources out there to empower parents to have these conversations with their kiddos.
Connor, I want to dive into that, but first, if I could you give our listeners maybe a little bit of background just on the Tuttle Twin series, how it originated, and kind of the road that you've taken to kind of get here to this point?
So I run, for those watching the video here, I run Libertas Institute, which is a nonprofit think tank. We change laws. We try and reduce the size and scope of government in order to free people and remove obstacles out of the way of entrepreneurs. And we've been at it for about 12 years. I founded it. And a few years into running this organization, my children at the time, my son was almost 6 and my daughter was 4. And like any dad, I'd come home from work and I'd say, hey, what did you do today? And we'd start the conversation, and my kids would report which cartoons they watched or which toys they play with. But my boy, when he was almost 6, occasionally he would reciprocate the question. Dad, what did you do today? Where were you?
Mm.
Mm.
And I didn't want to tell him, I typed on a computer today, son, or I did phone calls. I found myself wanting to share with him what dad does. Hey, kiddo, I was at City Hall fighting eminent domain in this really, stupid land grab that the government was after. But how do you talk to a 5 or 6 year old about
Mhm.
ideas like that? So, as anyone would do in my situation, I turned to Amazon and I went looking for books that would teach kids about economics or property rights or freedom and so forth. Came up short. There was nothing. This was in 2013,
Mm.
and I was talking about this with a buddy of mine who's a very creative guy, very creatively talented, and we were bouncing this idea around. He had young kids too at the time, and so we came up with this idea like, is there merit here? Should we do a kids book? This could be a fun little thing. There was no vision for any like master huge big thing. It was just like, this will be fun. Let's do a book together. So we did. And a lot of people bought it and asked us when the next one will be coming out. And we're like, yeah, okay, we'll get right on that. And it just kind of slowly over time, word of mouth, later we started marketing, but it was a very big word of mouth process where parents were sharing these resources with other like-minded parents. And so we grew slowly at first and more quickly recently. And so we've been at it for about 9-10 years that we've been putting out books. We've sold over 5 million copies.
Wow.
We're in a
Wow.
dozen languages. We've got a cartoon now. And it's just exciting to see it grow, because it's one thing to say, yay, we sold a bunch of books. What I treasure are all the stories, the feedback, hearing from parents about the impact it's having with their kids, the conversations that they're having that are more substantive and meaty rather than superficial and irrelevant. So that's what we're after, is these moments where we're seeing sparks happen in these family environments.
So part of our listener, part of the aspect that we like to touch on is this idea of business, man. Connor, how difficult was it getting this thing up and going off the ground? Right, you just shared 5 million books, but what's a big obstacle or two that you came up against along the way?
Well, I watch Shark Tank religiously,
Yeah.
and for those who do, you'll remember that one thing the sharks hate investing in are the businesses where the owner has to educate the customer about why they even need their product when they're creating a new category, right? Nothing like this exists. And the sharks are like, oh, you're going to have to like educate customers walking down the aisle or scrolling Instagram why they need that. They don't already know. So that's going to increase your cost of acquisition, your advertising. That's what it was for us. When we started the Tuttle Twins, nobody really agreed with us that you need to talk to your kids about it. No one knew about it. We in the conservative libertarian freedom side of things have for decades been just letting our kids get educated by our ideological adversaries that dominate the public school system. And then only when they're adults do we start talking to them about these adult ideas and, hey, here's why you should believe in freedom, or here's what free markets are. We don't even have those conversations. So at the time, everyone was kind of skeptical. Friends, allies, were all skeptical of the need to talk to your kids about these ideas. Well, fast forward a few years, especially COVID, now nobody questions.
Yeah.
Literally no, like it went from everyone was like, this is adult stuff. I don't need to. Let's let kids be kids. That was the biggest response we would get. Just let kids be kids. Save this stuff for when they're older. Well, now that we see that the left has, all their children's books, their toddler books, all the cartoons are woke, all the monthly magazines like highlights and everything, they're all woke. And now nobody questions the need to provide parents with resources that are going to help their children understand true principles at a young age, because those kids are being bombarded with nonsense from teachers and textbooks and TikTok and everything else. And so for us, it was one of those things when preparation meets opportunity. Like we had been prepared and doing this for a while, and all of a sudden the world went crazy in 2020 and ever since. And so now we don't have to educate the customer anymore. People are pretty well aware that they want help protecting their kids from all this nonsense and giving them a solid foundation of truth.
Connor, when do you think is the ideal time to present these books to your kids?
It's an interesting question because we have, I'm grabbing right here. I actually have a few of these in front of me. We've got toddler books. So here's the ABCs of economics. And so your question about when is it too early, like, O is for opportunity cost, right? Like, what other, here's one of my favorites. T is for taxes. And little toddler Emily is saying, no, mine. And the vacuum is saying, do not resist. So, and these are kind of tongue in cheek, right? Like, here's H is for human action by Mises, and I is for incentives. So to more appropriately answer your question, we started doing our children's books, which is what we're best known for. So these are kind of the 60-page storybooks, that are all based on classics like Economics in One Lesson, or The Road to Serfdom, or I, Pencil, or Atlas Shrugged, or The Law by Bastiat. So that's what we're most known for.
How are you defining children? Because sometimes I kind of call, Cameron like one of my children. But what age group are you talking about?
Correct. Right so those, not correct that you're a child. Correct that that's a good question.
Very mature. Trust me.
So my typical answer for those children's books that we're best known for is that they're best for ages like 5 to 11 and members of Congress. So if you fall into either of those categories, then they're good for you. So we've got the toddlers, we've got these kind of children's level, elementary age books, and then we have a bunch of books for teenagers as well. We've got some fiction books, we've got some nonfiction books. And so we're trying to provide parents with resources no matter the age of their kids, and also no matter how they like to learn. So if they're a little more hands-on, we've got activity workbooks and things that can kind of get them doing stuff. We've got a cartoon if they're more of like a visual, whatever. We've got cartoons, we got a podcast, we've got a game. We're trying to create resources for any age kid, no matter how they like to learn, so that they can embrace and understand and learn about these ideas as well.
When you're talking about the books for teenagers, I think I think the concept and the way you're presenting it is very interesting. You might want to share how these teenager books they're not just a typical novel.
Okay, so let me see what I have here in my office. I don't have every book, but I got a couple. Here we go. So we've got 2 sets of books for teenagers. Okay. The fiction set is based kind of the same format of those old choose your own adventure books, if you remember those from the 80s and the 90s. You want to go into the cave, turn to page 73. If you want to run away, turn to page 52, right? A lot of us read those growing up. So our books are called Choose Your Consequence. So this is the first book, Hyperinflation. It's got 400 pages in it. And so it's just a big novel, but it follows the same methods. So like, for example, if I'm reading in this thread right here, it says turn to page 398, or there's, lots of different story endings where people get cut off. But this allows, like here's one, if you think the twins should find another way out, turn to page 232. If you think the only reasonable option is to run the roadblock, turn to page 251. And so this one's called The Tuttle Twins and the Hyperinflation Devastation. And so the twins as teenagers, so here's Ethan and Emily, now we've aged them up, whereas in the toddler book, they're toddler age. So the twins go on this vacation where all of a sudden there's this cataclysmic breakdown of society, and the country that they're visiting in hyperinflates very quickly, and they're trying to figure out how to get home and pay for things with the money that they have. So it's a fun book to kind of see the effect of hyperinflation, if you will, through a fun adventure. So we got all these fiction books, and then we have a line of guide. We call them guidebooks. These are nonfiction books. So here's one of the ones I have in my office here. This one's called The Tuttle Twins Guide to Modern Villains, and every chapter is a different bad dude throughout history. So we got, Karl Marx, we've got Wilson, we've got Stalin, we got Mao, you got Mao Zedong, you got Kim Il-sung, Pinochet, Mugabe, Pol Pot, Castro, Mubarak, all these guys. So the point of this book for us is to not just like fearmonger and be like, look at all these evil people and all these evil things that have happened. The point in the book, as we step through these examples, is to try and understand what was happening. I mean, like we got course, we're going to have Hitler in a book like this, right? So we're trying to understand how someone like Hitler rose to power. What were the conditions in society that allowed for someone like this to centralize authority and rise to power? That's what we're after with this book, because then there's application there. It's okay, let's look at our society. Are there elements in our culture and society today that we can see patterns of in the past? We don't want another one of these megalomaniacs to, rise to power today. So what can we work on in our culture and society to minimize the likelihood that someone like that is going to rise to power and turn us into a, autocracy, authoritarian government? So we got these different, we've got one on logical fallacies. We've got one on cognitive biases. Both of those are hugely popular because they help with critical thinking. And we got a new one coming out in a couple of weeks, but these are the kind of the nonfiction books that we have for teens that just give them a little bit more meaty information.
Now, if somebody maybe they're now open to this idea, and have you seen something that works to help the kids get interested in reading the books in addition to all the other activities that they have?
So what surprised me most about doing these Tuttle Twins books over the years is the number of comments we would get from parents who would say things like, my son hates reading, but he loves your books. Or my daughter is dyslexic and struggles to read, but she will read your books all day long. And over and over, we would get these messages, and I would I don't think I'm anything special. It just, Elijah does amazing illustrations and we come up with a fun story and teach these ideas, but it's not like we sat down and created this secret formula to get kids to enjoy reading these ideas. So I was perplexed. I was like, why are we getting this feedback? What is it about these books that's really clicking with these kids? The simple summary of all of that kind of research and asking around is this. Think of yourself when you were a teenager and you were at Thanksgiving dinner with the extended family. And you've got the big table where all the adults sit, but there's a lot of adults. There's a lot of aunts and uncles. And then you've got the kids' table with the plastic forks and knives and the little card table, but you're caught in the middle. You don't want to sit with the little kids, and yet they're making you do that. You want to be with the big kids. You want to be with the adults. That encapsulates this common thread. Children want to be challenged. They want to be like a big kid. The big kids want to be like adults. And the magic of our books that we've stumbled into is that we're not feeding kids crap that meets them at their age. Johnny and Sally went on the playground, we're friggin' talking about opportunity costs in a book for toddlers, right? Obviously it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it shows the point that throughout all of our books, we are taking kids love being smarter than most adults. When we tell them, guys, when you read The Miraculous Pencil and you learn about spontaneous order, you are going to know something that 99% of adults don't know and don't understand. Kids think that is super cool. So the magic of our books is that we're exposing them to ideas that few people know about and understand, and they, aspiring for more, wanting to be challenged, implicitly, they gravitate to this. So most parents, when they ask me, what should I do to get my kids interested in the books? My answer literally is put them out on the coffee table. Don't tell your kids to read them. Don't even talk about it. Just leave them there. They're colorful. They're attractive. They're going to start reading and they're going to get hooked because they're like, oh, wow, I'm super smart now. And I can simply understand. If I were to go to, let's say, Bob on the side of the road, and I hand Bob, let's say, The Road to Serfdom by Hayek, classic free market book, right? Decades old. But it's back when English had multiple syllable words, these bigger words that we struggle with today. There's no pictures. So if I give Bob this book, I say, Bob, this book is amazing. It's going to teach you all about how markets work and how you can, better prosper, with this economic information. Let me throw it to you gentlemen as a question. What is the percentage likelihood that you think Bob will, number one, accept the book that I offer him, and number two, go home and read it?
Close to zero.
If you reach the book out and act like you're handing it to him, he'll grab it from you.
Yeah,
right.
Take it,
but he's definitely not going to go home and reach that by any means. Yeah, read it.
I agree. I think it's sub 1% easily. By contrast, if I go to Bob and I say, hey, Bob, do you have kids? Yeah, I got a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, 8-year-old. Awesome. Do you think it's important for your kids to understand, how the economy works and how they can prosper as they grow up? I think 90% plus, if not 100%, say, well, yeah, because we as parents want the best for our children. We get FOMO on behalf of our kids, fear of missing out. We don't want our kids to miss out of any opportunity. And so I think Bob absolutely says, yes. I say, great, Bob, I've got this book that I'll use this one as an example. I've got this children's book, The Tuttle Twins and the Messed Up Market. This one in particular is based off of Human Action by Ludwig von Mises, and incorporates a lot of the ideas from his book. But I say, Bob, here's a kid's book. It's a simple storybook. You can read it at night with your kids before bedtime, and they're going to learn a lot of these core ideas that as they read this, several times over the years or whatever, they're going to know more than most adults. They're going to be well prepared with a foundation. What do you think? Are you interested? I think chances are very, very high that Bob accepts the book, that he goes home and reads the book with his kids. Now, what have I done there? I have bypassed Bob's defense mechanism. When I give Bob The Road to Serfdom by Hayek, I'm implicitly telling him he's stupid, right? I'm telling him, you lack information. You are ignorant. You need to be, and he's, oh, I'm too busy. It's not a priority. I'm not stupid. Who are you to tell me otherwise? And so his defense mechanisms come up. By getting to him, by going through him to his kids, his defenses are down. Bob goes to read it at night with his kids. He now, because his defenses are down, he's learning as well. Over half of the parents who get our books tell us that they're learning new things for the first time, which is a sad indictment on the government school system. But these parents, their defense mechanisms are down. And beyond that, Bob now appreciates me rather than resenting me because I'm telling him he's stupid or, anything like that. He appreciates that I've created value for his kids. And maybe he hasn't really clicked yet and realized that I'm creating value for him as well. But it's a way for us to educate the whole family. I'll wrap it with this story. Early on, we would go into the schools and we would do, what do they call them? Like class presentations, assemblies, we'd have these fun little free market lessons and make it fun for kids with, like I had one based on iPencil where I would bring like a really massive pencil and then a block of lead and a block of, graphite, not lead, graphite, and a little thing of yellow paint, a block of cedar wood. And we would kind of have fun talking about the parts of the pencil. I would have kids come up and we would use like the kids' t-shirt. Great. What are all the things that go into making a t-shirt? You need cotton. Great. How do we get cotton? We need cotton picking machines and we need, whatever the loom and all the things, right? So it's just a fun little object lesson. So we would go into the schools, we would do these lessons. The kids would go home. Mom would say, hey, sweetie, how was your day? Fine. What'd you learn today? Nothing. I don't know. Right. And there's a disconnect between parents and kids in the home. So we are now 99% focused on the home environment, direct to consumer, trying to get the parents themselves to get the books for their kids rather than relying on the teachers. Why? Here's an anecdote. A few weeks ago, a dad was listening to NPR in the radio. His kids are in the back seat and they read the Tuttle Twins, and the talking heads on the radio were talking about inflation. And one of the hosts on the radio program said, well, you know why inflation's happening? It's because these Beyonce concerts and Taylor Swift concerts, they're just selling out and it's heating up the economy. Everyone's spending their money all of a sudden. And we just need to chill out, and the 9-year-old in the back seat chimes in and says, they're lying. Inflation is because the Federal Reserve is printing a bunch of money. And so the dad, turns off the radio and was able to have a meaningful conversation with the daughter, building upon what she had learned about in the book, using this recent, headline, this news thing as an opportunity to help her understand not only inflation and economics, but have a conversation about why are these people so ignorant? And all these experts and all these authority figures throughout your life, young daughter, are going to claim things that are bogus. So you need to be critically thinking. And here's an example where we need to not trust what we're hearing just because we're hearing it. That is what we're after. We want parents and kids to have a common language by reading these books together, so that in the informal moments of life when those learning opportunities present themselves, there's not a disconnect where kid learned it at school, but parent is clueless. We want them on the same wavelength so that they can have amazing conversations. That's what we're really after.
Connor, one thing I'd point out is man, the books, I would attribute a lot of success, at least to my kids, is the format of the story. Right? I used to tuck what had me thinking of this. I used to tuck my kids into to bed each night, right? And I'd have maybe a dozen stories that were like the go-to ones that I would tell them. So they would like request stories, right, based upon whatever mood they're in. So I just tell them a story. At the end, there's always this big laugh. But in your books, man, it's this story and this thread of like the education throughout that I think is really stuck with my kids. And then I couldn't agree with your sentiment anymore. That, man, at this young age, this is when kids are able, in my opinion, to learn the absolute most. And so this idea of dumbing education down to them is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. Man, I'm always surprised about how quickly kids, I'm just speaking of my kids, they pick stuff up if you give them these ideas. So
That's right.
like we'll come home and I'll talk to them about my day, and same thing, right? As I try to give them insight into what I'm doing and the conversations I've had with clients and that stuff. And man, I'm always surprised at how quickly they pick it up. And I'll always try to take it to a conclusion and be like, if you're in this situation, what would you do? Right. And anyways, I thought that's a great testament, kind of the way the books are written. But you touched on a couple. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you touched on a couple things there that I want to make sure we touch on before we wrap up. One is why this isn't being taught in schools. And also number two is this idea of empowering our kids so that they're not just, it's not just rote memorization. So I want to touch on Jaden too, before we jump off, but give me some input, man. What's your opinion? Why is this stuff not being taught in schools?
Well, recently there was a group that had that question, trying to assess the quality of the school system in America. They called themselves the National Commission on Excellence in Education. They got this group together of experts and people who are passionate about education. They went on a listening tour around the country for 18 months, talking to teachers and parents and students, reviewing curriculum, trying to just get a thorough analysis of how education is going in America. And then they recently published a report called A Nation at Risk, where they warned in that report, this is a verbatim quote, they said America's educational performance is being overwhelmed by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens to overwhelm America's educational foundations, and that if a foreign government had attempted to impose upon us the very mediocre educational performance that now exists today, we might have viewed it as an act of war. As it stands, they said, we've allowed this to happen to ourselves. Now, this rising tide of mediocrity, their report again was called A Nation at Risk. They called it an open letter to the American people. Well, I fibbed a little bit when I set up this story. This did not recently happen. This report came out April 26, 1983. The Reagan administration, 40 years ago, published this warning to the American people about mediocrity in the school system. When I share this story in my speaking engagements around the country, different groups, different sizes, I always love sharing this story. And then I say, raise of hands, who in this audience thinks that the school system has substantially improved in the last 40 years? To date, nobody has raised their hand, because we all know that if it was mediocre then, it's probably a colorful 4-letter word today is what I might use to describe it. So look, the school system has, I was speaking to a parents group a few months back, and the mom was in the Q&A after was rattling off all these examples of why she's frustrated with the school system. The critical race theory and all the gender wars and awful books in the library and blah, 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 blah. And she said, the school's system is broken. And I said, oh, hang on, respectfully, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think the school system is broken at all. I think it has been perfected based on a flawed design. When you go back and you look at the Horace Manns and the John Deweys and all these early pioneers of our modern government school system, what's happening today is a direct outgrowth and byproduct of their intent, why they were trying to do this. They did not want to raise critical thinkers, independent-minded, entrepreneurial, self-governing people. They wanted obedient soldiers and citizens. This is the Prussian model that they got from Prussia, this very authoritarian model. They wanted a collective that was easily controlled and subordinated to the ruling elite. That is what they were after. That is what we've produced today. So I don't think it's broken. I think what's happening is intentional and is an outgrowth of what's happened. So if you don't like the output, if you don't want your kids to turn into what we're seeing these schools pump our children out to be, you have to question the nature of the system itself. You have to rescue your children from that system, because it's not impossible. There are a number of kids who turn out to be well-functioning, productive people who still went to the system. So it's not impossible. It's just a massive uphill challenge that would require parents to be extremely involved, extremely aware, and help shield their kids and teach their kids and all the things despite the challenges that they're having. So, and the final thing I'll share is for those who consider themselves on the right, the conservatives, libertarians, and others, the government school system is dominated by people on the left. 87% of high school teachers support Democrats. And then you think, okay, well, high school, yeah, I get it, but not in the elementary school. That's when things are just, benign and apolitical and whatever. 84% of elementary school teachers support Democrats. So this system has been infused with people who share a worldview, who are in an intellectual echo chamber of groupthink that few people, before we had like libs of TikTok and other people shining a spotlight on what's going on, few people questioned. So they've created this echo chamber, and all the kids that are being pumped out and all the social justice warriors and everything is a direct byproduct of this system that we've let be mediocre and sub-mediocre for decades. So yeah, I'm a big fan of homeschooling, private school, micro school, all the rest. But I don't think every parent has to pull their kid out of government schools. I think you'll get better outcomes that way. But if your kids are going to be in the government schools, your responsibility, if you want a well-functioning, smart, independent child, is triple what any other parent is, because you've got to be on guard. You have to be intentional. You have to be teaching your kids at home. So for Tuttle Twins, half of our audience is homeschoolers. The other half is public, private, and charter school. And those parents know that they have to do a little bit more. They have to provide their kids a counter agent to thwart all the intellectual viruses that they're getting in the school. And so for them, our resources can be a way to supplement in the home what they know that their kids aren't learning in the schools.
One thing I've told my kids over the years is that I think I mentioned this, rote memorization, right? It's no longer needed, right? It's their job when they go to school is to ask good questions. It's to evaluate the information that they're being given. And a great example of this is a young man, Jaden, right? And Jaden, I don't know the story in detail. I know you know it more, but just to introduce it, is a young man out of Colorado. A video of him and his mom talking to some of the school administrators. He was pulled out of class and eventually kicked out of school because he had the Gadsden flag on his backpack, and they said that it was rooted in slavery, I believe. And the video is the mom and even Jaden there educating these school administrators that, hey, it's not based in slavery. It's actually based out of, I think, revolution. Yeah, British tyranny. And so just a great piece to it. But man, I think you got some great publicity out of that, because I remember seeing a follow-up video with them interviewing Jaden independently, and they said, hey, where'd you get this education? And he gave credit to his mom. He said, hey, my mom, great influence on me, but also I read the Tuttle Twins by Connor Boyack. So, man, give us a little bit of background. How's that been as far as exposure been for you?
So here's a kid, Jaden, who's been reading the Tuttle Twins books for about 4 years, and very patriotic kid. He loves America. He loves, the First Amendment. He especially loves the Second Amendment. And so he's got a bag with all these patches, and he, expressing his interest in things. And yeah, the teacher complained. The vice principal in the video claimed that the Gadsden flag has origins in slavery and therefore is a disruption to the classroom environment, and that Jaden would not be welcome to return unless and until he removed the patch. Well, as you saw in the video, flat out wrong, totally wrong. So nonetheless, they get kicked out. Jaden gets kicked out. Mom is driving him home. He turns to his mom and he says, hey, in one of those Tuttle Twins books, when the twins had a political problem, with the government, they got the media involved. Do you think we could get the media involved? And the mom's like, All right, literally detours and drives him over to the local TV station, where Jaden gets out, goes up to the front doorbell, the little security doorbell, rings the bell, and asks if he can talk to a reporter to share
No
his
way.
story. No one would talk to him. So later that night, they're figuring out what to do because he wanted to stand up for himself. He saw this as an opportunity to defend his rights. And so the mom messages me on Twitter. I never knew who they were. They just, she reaches out cold and shoots me a DM on Twitter and says, "Hey, my son's your biggest fan. We love your books. Here's what happened. My son wants to stand up for himself. Do you think you could help us spread the word?" She shares the video with me. I'm in Chicago at a conference in a jazz club listening to this amazing, jazz. I get this DM and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gold. Like I immediately knew this video would go viral. So with her permission, I shared it the following morning on Twitter. Now, within a week or two total, it's got about 50 million combined views across social media. It just massively blew up. The interview you're mentioning was with Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire, where Ben was like, yeah, you seem to, after they had talked for several minutes, he's like, you seem to know a lot about history and have a lot of, opinions and views. How have you learned so much? And he said, my mom and Connor Boyack with his Tuttle Twins books. So I actually went out to Colorado last weekend with my wife, and we visited with Jaden. I'm gonna let's see if we can pull up a photo here. So here's if you throw that on the screen, this is a photo that I took with Jaden. We created these custom shirts that say "Don't tread on me," but instead of the snake, we've got a picture of his backpack, which was which we're holding right there. And on the lower right of the backpack, you can see there's the Gadsden flag patch. That's the one that they were critiquing. And so I made shirts for Jaden and his siblings, and we had breakfast with them together. It was a lot of fun to spend that time together. But here's a kid who knew about his rights, and then he was prepared to stand up for them. I want to create a million more Jadens. I want to make sure that we can educate kids about all these ideas so that when they're presented with opportunities, whether they're 12 or 42 down the road, that they know what their rights are. Imagine if you have shared property, or you have a next door neighbor and you both have your front lawns connected, but you don't quite know, excuse me, you don't quite know where the property boundary is. Let's say the county records got destroyed or you've never looked. So the neighbor is a filthy guy, and he starts, he's got old car tires and trash, and it's starting to spill over more and more into what you think is your yard. But if you don't actually know where that boundary exists, you lack the ability to really check the advance and say, hey, this far and no further. That is the problem with our rights. If we don't understand them, we can't defend them, and they will be encroached upon more and more and more. And so we have to know where those lines are. Where are the boundaries? What are our rights? 12-year-old kids can understand them. He's been reading this since he was 8. And so we can do that with our kids too. We can inform them, but we have to, whether it's our books or you want to do it on your own, but we have to have those conversations. We have to simplify these ideas. We have to use storytelling so that it's fun for kids to learn. And these ideas will stick in. I've seen it so many times. So many stories across the country. Jaden's is, now the most prominent of the stories, but he's not alone. And there are many other circumstances where kids have been able to kind of put into practice the ideas that they've learned because they've been reading them for a while.
Connor, we've got a couple of comments on YouTube. One here says, man, Connor almost makes me want to have my own kids.
Well, we do have to outbreed our enemies, right? So if nothing else, we've got to, they're underpopulating the world. We've got to overpopulate the world and compete. So,
this is a good point to make, that when we have a guest on our podcast, we are live streaming it on our YouTube channel and Facebook. So not only do you get to see it unedited without any mistakes, but more importantly, you have the ability to ask questions and be part of the show. In order to make sure you don't miss one, you need to be on our email list or subscribe to our email channel. And we have one more. This is a great segue. Where's the best place to order these books?
So a lot of the books, not all of them, are on Amazon, but the best place is TuttleTwins.com, because we have big bundle deals at discounts and bonuses and things that you're not going to get on Amazon at all. You had asked about kind of the business angle for some of your listeners, that you like some of that. So for years, we did not list on Amazon at all. And the reason is I want to know everyone who buys a Tuttle Twins book, so that when a new one comes out, like we've got a new one coming out in a couple of weeks, I want to be able to go tell them and say, hey guys, come get the latest one. But when you sell through Amazon and these third-party intermediaries, you have no idea who your customers are, and you don't have a relationship with them. So for years, we did not list on Amazon. We started about 3 or 4 years ago, finally putting our books there, but they comprise roughly 1% of our sales. So TuttleTwins.com is the place to get them. That's where you're going to get the best price, the best deals. And we're always running sales. Like, we got a massive Black Friday one that we're preparing that's going to be huge. But and then we got the books for all ages, but everything's at TuttleTwins.com.
Connor, let's before we wrap this up, we'll get 2 additional resources that I would add to that. I'll have you expand on one of them, but you guys have a podcast that's out there. Is this geared for parents, children, or both? Who's that geared towards?
Yeah, so if you search Tuttle Twins in your preferred podcast app, you'll find ours. We call it The Way the World Works. And they are each about 15-minute episodes. They're really designed for when mom or dad are in the car with the kids, maybe to go drop them off at school or run some errands. They're quick little episodes, because what we're trying to do is plant seeds that you can harvest later that night over the dinner table. Right? Hey, let's talk about that idea from the podcast that we listened to today. What did you guys think about that? And what are some examples, or whatever. So we're just planting a lot of little conversational seeds. So that's you go to TuttleTwins.com/podcast, or just look up Tuttle Twins in your preferred podcast app.
2 of my favorite topics that you put out recently. One of them was, should we ban TikTok? And the other one was how the income tax was created. Those are great titles, great content. So guys, if you're listening, go out there, look these guys up. The link will be in the show notes.
Connor, you had mentioned a cartoon. Where can we get access to that?
Yeah, so our cartoon is available on the Angel Studios platform. They're the team behind like The Chosen and Sound of Freedom and these other things that are popular as well. So on your smart TV or on your phone or whatever, download the Angel Studios app. It's kind of like a Netflix app where they have a whole bunch of shows in there, but with Angel Studios, it's all free. There's no subscription. There's no sign up. You download, you start watching for free. So get the Angel Studios app on your Roku, your Apple TV, your phone, whatever, or you can just Google Tuttle Twins cartoon and you'll find their website, and you can just start watching right on your computer. Our cartoon is designed both for parents and kids. We've got 2 levels of humor. All of our writers are comedians, so it's just lots of jokes and gags. So we've got silly jokes for the kids to make it funny and silly for them to enjoy watching. But we've got the highbrow intellectual humor as well that the parents are going to get, and the kids are going to be like, why is that funny? And then you get an opportunity to kind of explain the information. So yeah, just search Tuttle Twins cartoon and you'll find it.
Awesome.
All right, Connor, last resource I'm going to bring up, right, is we've got a lot of parents that I know personally that have taken your curriculum and made it into like a homeschooling program for them. But in addition to that, you guys also have the academy that's coming out. Tell our listeners about that.
So we're in progress of building the Tuttle Twins Academy. This will come out next summer. And it is basically a library of video-based courses from a whole bunch of smart people on a wide range of topics. So things like critical thinking and logic, civics, persuasive writing and speaking, philosophy, history, entrepreneurship, economics, engaging content from smart people for teens and frankly adults as well, who I think will get a lot out of it. And so we're in the process of building that. We're still in the early days, but we're planning on launching right when kids are getting out of school in the spring and summer, so that this could be kind of a summer educational program leading then into the fall for them to keep going. So stay tuned on that. That'll take us some months to build, but we're excited about it.
Awesome, Connor. Man, really appreciate you coming back. We'll bring you back here sometime in the next year or so and reintroduce you to our listeners. Thanks again, man.
Great chatting with you guys. See you later.
Thanks. Go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.
If you like this video, I know you're like this one. And if you want to learn how investors use infinite banking to increase their returns and lower their taxes, check this out. And if you have some questions and want to see if infinite banking is for you, hop on a discovery call with us. Link for that will be in the description.